The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales radio show, your fortnightly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic, and folklore. And now here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to all of you in paranormal radio and podcast land. This is our 12th show, our Grey Lady, Brown Monk haunting, skipping and Pancake Bell ringing, 7 things you didn't know about St Valentine's Day, Arthur C Clarke Remembering, and Ancient Origins new editor interviewing episode.
And now, here's Janie.
Hello everyone, and it goes without saying that 2 of the hot topics this show are going to be Valentine's Day and Shrove Tuesday. I know you have some weird folk custom story from your youth about Shrove Tuesday, Charles, and I don't just mean the fact that you prefer golden syrup on your pancakes rather than lemon and sugar. But before we get on to that, I've been doing my own research, and there's 7 things I bet you didn't know about St Valentine and St Valentine's Day.
7 things? No. Let's go. And the first thing we didn't know is...
Okay, this is not really very exciting, but anyway, in the 1750 years since St Valentine was martyred in Rome, there's never ever been even one church dedicated to St Valentine in England.
That's amazing. I mean, considering all the money the greetings card industry makes out of him, you'd have thought they'd have sponsored one. On to the second thing.
Well, there's a suggestion that the early Christian church in Rome was keen to venerate St Valentine on the 14th of February, as that coincided with the old pagan festival of Lupercalia. And so this was a handy opportunity to replace a pagan event with a Christian feast.
How convenient. And I see one of the highlights of Lupercalia was eating salty cakes made by the Vestal Virgins and then running naked in an anti-clockwise direction around the Palatine Hill in Rome, hitting everyone you met with a leather thong.
Yeah, apparently it was regarded as a good luck thing for a Roman woman to be hit with a naked man's thong.
Now, perhaps we should point out here that by thong we do mean a leather strap rather than something more intimate. And a third thing?
Well, I don't think that actually makes it any better, really. Anyway, so it appears the whole modern concept of Valentine's Day being associated with romance has nothing to do with the saint and was actually invented by the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer and some of his mates in the later 14th century.
Clearly, Geoffrey Chaucer was not only a well-known writer, but also a founding member of the Union of Writers of Greeting Card Rhymes.
That's
Probably.
not true, is it, actually, Charles? You just made that up, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Moving swiftly to number 4, and this involves a complete change of tone. When the St Valentine's Day Massacre took place in Chicago in 1929, there were a total of 7 victims gunned down by mobsters working for Al Capone. But what a lot of people don't know is that one of the victims, Frank Gusenberg, he was still alive when the police found him. He was taken to hospital, which is very nice of them, but when the police asked who had shot him, Gusenberg, who had sustained 14 bullet wounds, said, "No one shot me." He died 3 hours later.
He possibly didn't say it in such a high-pitched voice, but never mind. Yes, so, Mafia Code of Silence, a murder and all that. OK, number 5.
Right, well, our 5th factoid, we go over to the man himself, St Valentine. Although this really is a case of, will the real St Valentine please stand up? As it transpires, there's a considerable amount of uncertainty as to who St Valentine was, or if he really existed at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out there are at least 11 saints called Valentine who are venerated by the Roman Catholic Church, including the two most likely candidates, a Roman priest and a bishop from Umbria in central Italy, who had the misfortune to be arrested and martyred while on a trip to Rome during the reign of the Emperor Claudius Gothicus in AD 279. And the only other thing we know about these two is one apparently liked pickles and the other had a dog.
Pickles.
Yeah. Anyway, the legend goes on to say St Valentine was arrested for marrying Christian couples. He restored the eyesight of his jailer's blind daughter, and then he was beheaded.
Having your head cut off does tend to go with the territory with being martyred. Okay, and for number 6, we have the fact he must have been a very big man.
Yes, a very, very big man indeed. And you can see or find his remains in a church in Rome, a church in Madrid,
Okay.
at a church in Dublin,
Okay.
a church in Prague.
Aha.
You're going to not have to say that after I've said everything, because I'm going to be going on for quite a long time.
Okay.
At a church in Poland, at a church in the Greek Isle of Lesbos, at a church in France, at a church in Malta, in a cathedral in Vienna, in a church in the Gorbals area of Glasgow, and in a church in Birmingham, that's in England.
And finally, for our 7th thing,
Along with being the patron saint of engaged couples, love and happy marriage, St Valentine is also the patron saint of beekeepers, as well as epilepsy, fainting, and, now it's just getting really silly, the plague, really.
well, beekeeping, I suppose that's a bit like the birds and the bees.
Yeah.
As for the others, they do say, he says, cringing, that love is like a disease. When you catch it, there is no cure.
Well, actually, there is.
Oh,
Get married and then notice how noisily your new partner breathes or eats.
or snores.
Yeah, not you, of course.
Oh, good. And, of course, last week we had our own Valentine's experience of the paranormal when you found that potato that was a perfect heart shape. Have we still got it?
No, I ate it. But obviously, I took a photo of it first and posted it on Facebook.
Right.
All right?
Yes.
You are listening to the Weird Tales Radio Show with Charles Christian on internet radio and podcast.
I'm one of the resident experts for the Ancient Origins online community and website, and I recently had the opportunity to interview South Africa-based journalist, psychologist and archaeology enthusiast Dr. Mickey Pistorius, who has just been appointed the new editor for the Ancient Origins premium site. I'm talking to Dr. Mickey Pistorius, who has recently become the new editor of the Ancient Origins website. Hello, Mickey.
Hello, Charles.
For the benefit of our listeners who aren't familiar with Ancient Origins, can you just give a quick name check on what it is and who they are?
AncientOrigins.net is a website, a very popular website regarding archaeology, myths, legends, history, etc. We have about 4 million visitors to our site. We have daily stories, and we have a premium member site as well. We offer different out-of-the-box views as well as academic archaeological articles.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of fun. A lot.
Given your background, how did you come to be interested in the Ancient Origins site?
Well, I think psychology and journalism, I write about people, and I've always been interested in people or in the human species and what they do and what motivates them, etc. And in history, where do they come from? We ask questions, we look at the sky and we wonder, and we don't just believe everything that we read, and we do research. And I've been a psychologist for first a journalist, and then after that a psychologist for many, many years. And I told myself one day when I retire, I will write about archaeology. I have an honours degree in archaeology. That's my secret passion.
Yeah.
And then recently, last year, I just decided, well, why wait till I retire? It's not that far, but why wait? So I approached Ancient Origins and asked them if they could write, and they said yes. And here I am, fulfilling my dream, writing about archaeology. I still have a small little tiny psychology practice. I've written many books on psychology as well, but finally I am where I want to be.
And I've also read one of your other books, The Hero Warriors. Now that's interesting, and it's a perspective on human male to women relationships, but you're drawing sort of classical allusions, aren't you, on it?
Can we call men human? I think they are a different species. Yes. What happened in that book is in my practice, I do a lot of relationships and marriage counseling, etc. And I actually really started listening to men and what they say. And I realized that women don't hear this. We don't. And we hear what they say, what we think it just can't be so, and then we ignore it, we don't believe it, and we carry on to think men think the way we think they think, but they don't. So I was inspired to write the book, and the men were very excited and said, please write it, that the women can see what we are all about. So the basic principle of the book is that men are heroes. They are born to provide and to protect. And this is innately what makes him a man. And then because I love archaeology and history, I drew some comparisons to the Trojan War. Just to explain, using Greek mythology to explain what I mean. For an example, every man has a quest in his life, something that is really important to him. It could either be his job, or it could be a hobby or an interest, or etc. Now, it's hard to believe for a woman, but this is more important to him than love. Men believe they conquer the world. Women believe love conquers all. Men don't believe that. So the quest is really, really important, more important than the love life. And as illustration, we have Achilles, who was promised by the gods. He could either have a happy life with a wife and children, and he will be remembered by one or two of his descendants, or he can go down in history as the most best warrior of all times. And he chose that. That was his quest. So he followed his male quest, and he is known as the best warrior ever. And then we have the Trojan prince Paris, and he was also given a choice, and he chose love, Helen. And in his choice, he had his whole city of Troy or Ilium destroyed, because men are not supposed to choose love. They're supposed to choose their quest. And this is the difference between men and women. A man, even if the right woman stands in front of him, if it's not the right time in his life, he will abandon her. And women can't believe this, because they will drop everything for the right man in their life, while a man will not. He will follow his quest. And that's a sad thing, but it's important that women should know this. If you're going to try and force a man into marriage or a relationship when he's not ready, you're going to lose him.
This is the Perseus and Ariadne, isn't it? Or is it Theseus?
Yes, that's another good example, because Theseus went and he conquered and he slayed the Minotaur, and there was Ariadne who was the princess, and she helped him in that quest, and eventually he took her along. But somewhere along the islands, he left her, and he had other love relationships as well, which saddened her very much. But she interfered in his quest.
Jason and Medea is rather similar, isn't it?
That's another one, yes. He went off and he married Glauca, the princess, and Medea was very, very upset about this whole thing. The book also illustrates that thing about never underestimate a woman when she's angry with a man, and the extent of what they would do, which is a lesson for the men. I think what also comes out in the book often is men often accuse women that they have expectations.
Yeah.
But it's the men that create the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're very enthusiastic in the beginning and they don't realize, but they are creating. And that I often just compare to a shopping trolley. You know, if you go to a shop and he says, well, this looks nice, let's put it in the trolley, we're going to have this tonight. And, oh, this looks nice, and he falls in the trolley. And she gets enthusiastic and she also puts stuff in the trolley. And eventually when they get to the till, he leaves her with a trolley full of empty promises and he's shopping off with somebody else. And she thinks, but what about this? And what about that? That's sort of making empty promises. And I ask the men, why do they do it? And they say, well, at the moment when they're making the promise, they believe it.
Seemed like a good idea at the time, yes.
Yeah, it does. It does. But then don't be angry with her for having expectations if you create them. Are you guilty, Charles?
Moving swiftly on. With your new Ancient Origins hat on, are you planning any changes in their coverage or the emphasis of it? I mean, at the moment, it's a very good mixture of, if you like, serious archaeology and pop history stroke heading in slightly conspiracy theories. You know, these are the ancient people that society don't want us to know about, and things, you know, missing races of giants and things of that nature. Are you planning any changes in it at all?
We have discussed this. You know, we're a group that work together very, very well. And yes, we are envisaging something that's really important to us is the conservation and preservation of archaeological sites, especially what's happening at the moment. So what we'd like to see is Ancient Origins becoming a platform for archaeologists to showcase their work, you know, what they're busy with, more to the lay population out there, but also to use the site to create an awareness to conserve and preserve these sites. And in that sense, we want to work with governments and sort of you know, give a country a month or something. We're not sure yet. We're working on that, where we will showcase their country and promote tourism to their sites and tell the history and the stories. You know, by interviewing and visiting these sites, just to introduce them to people with an interest, so that we can, in a sense, conserve them. That's really important to us. So in that sense, yes, conservation is really important to us, and also really getting the archaeologists. We want to visit their digs, their excavations,
right,
and interview right there where they're working. You know, and tell people the interesting work that they're doing, because most of their work is actually only discussed in very academic journals,
yes,
which lay people don't really read. You know? So if we can make it visual and change it into stories and show them photographs and videos and everything on our site, and that's worldwide.
Yeah,
we would like to do that. So we've got big plans that we're looking at to bring in as well.
In terms of historic sites, what are your favourites, or the ones you've seen? What stand out for you?
Oh, there are plenty. It started off in Paris. There was a love affair with Paris, and then it went over to the Trojan War, and then I fell in love with Odysseus. I met him at the site of Troy. He's just sort of sitting there, this very lonely character, and I walked up to him and started talking to him and realized it was actually Odysseus sitting there, and he gave me lots of information about me because he's been around for a while, you know. So he's a personal favorite friend of mine. I love Troy. Also in Turkey, there's really beautiful places that I have seen, Ephesus, etc., but still some more places that I do want to go. And then also I have a yearning or a calling, to visit Iran and Iraq and eventually Syria if we can get into it.
Yes.
Especially, with a mind of conserving those sites and making people aware of them.
Yes.
So those are still places that I'd love to visit is Lebanon and Jordan and Iran and Iraq and Syria, more the Levant.
Yeah.
But unusual places that I've been to Pakistan, and there by I'm very grateful to their government, and there is a site, they say, where this is actually the site where Alexander the Great experienced the mutiny, had to turn around. So my guide and I went looking for that site, and we just came to an open piece of felt or ground, wherever, and there was nothing. And we kept on looking, and suddenly I realized, but this is it. It just hasn't been excavated yet,
Yeah.
open piece of land. And that was quite a revelation, knowing that you are actually standing here where this happened, but there's nothing there yet. It needs to be excavated. But that was a wonderful experience as well, just knowing where you are.
Yeah. You mentioned the Temple of Poseidon at Sunion.
Yes.
That's one I'm not familiar with.
It's a peninsula below Athens. So if you travel along the coast road, which is a beautiful road, to the peninsula, right at the end there is the Temple of Sunion, which is the Temple of Poseidon. Now, this is as well the site, long before that, where Aegus, who was the grandfather of Theseus,
Right.
and Aegus was the ruler of Athens, and he sent Theseus to Crete or Knossos or to the Minoans to go and slay the Minotaur. And he had an agreement with Theseus that if Theseus returns and he's alive, he should have a white sail. But if there's a black sail on the ship, then Aegus would know that his grandson is dead. So when Theseus returned, of course, he was alive, and by then he'd gotten rid of Ariadne, which might become very needy, I don't know. But he returned, but he forgot to change sails. So he had a black sail on his ship. And that's where Aegus saw the black ship approaching, and he was heartbroken, and he committed suicide. He jumped from the cliff there into the sea, and that's why it's called the Aegean Sea. So it's a very mystical place, and Athenians often go there on a full moon. It's very beautiful. I've been there once. Very mystical, very beautiful place. This Temple of Poseidon, right there on the peninsula, and the view is wonderful. Really, really beautiful place.
That's wonderful. No, I've never heard of that. I've heard of the black sail myth. I mean, that's a typical man thing.
Yes, it is. I also wonder. I wonder if not deliberately he didn't change sails, because of course the moment the King Aegus was dead, he was king.
That's true. I think it's more like men just not changing their socks regularly. The sails are all right. Right. Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Mickey. And just for the benefit of our listeners, I'm also a contributor to Ancient Origins, which is how we made contact. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the months and years to come. So, Mickey, once again, many, many thanks.
Thanks, Charles.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, part of the Paranormal UK radio network. Do we have any ghostly hauntings for this show, Charles?
Well, it wouldn't be a Weird Tales radio show without one. And tonight's has a wonderful backstory.
Ooh, I'm listening.
The legend is that every 24th of February, at about 11 p.m, the ghosts of a grey lady and a brown monk are said to haunt the streets and graveyards of the Suffolk town of Bury St Edmunds, particularly around the cathedral precincts, the ruins of the old abbey, St Mary's churchyard and Angel Hill. The story is that the grey lady is the ghost of a young nun called Maud Carew, She was the daughter of a member of the aristocracy and used to attend the royal court, where she met the Queen, Margaret of Anjou. But tired of the superficiality of court life, she took her vows and retired to a priory to become a nun. But she was also still obsessed with a monk called Brother Bernard, who had once been her lover during her time at court, and, should be noted, before he too had taken holy orders.
I was wondering. Thank you
Yes.
for clearing that up.
Okay. Fast forward to the year 1447, and King Henry VI was holding a meeting of Parliament in Bury. On the top of the agenda was the fate of Humphrey, the Duke of Gloucester. He was the king's uncle and had once been the most powerful man in the kingdom, but had fallen out with the king and made lots of enemies in high places. In early February 1447, Humphrey was charged with treason and arrested. But 12 days later, on the 24th of February, he was dead. His doctors claimed it was a stroke or a heart attack brought on by the stress of being charged with treason, which seems fair enough, as the punishment for treason was to be hanged, drawn and quartered. Naturally, there were rumours that he'd actually been poisoned by his enemies to ensure his silence, and did not raise any embarrassing counter-accusations during his trial. The two people the finger of suspicion pointed at were Cardinal Henry Beaufort, a long-time rival of Duke Humphrey, as well as being another of the king's uncles, and the Duke of Suffolk, rumoured to be Queen Margaret's lover. The story is Queen Margaret visited Maud Carew to warn her that because Brother Bernard was going to give evidence for the prosecution at Duke Humphrey's treason trial, this would place Bernard in mortal danger if the Duke was acquitted. Having pulled Maud into the conspiracy, Cardinal Beaufort then supplied Maud with a phial of deadly contact poison. Maud administered this poison to the Duke by pouring a few drops onto his lips as he slept, but then, whether by accident or design, Cardinal Beaufort may have neglected to warn her just how toxic the poison was, to ensure there were no witnesses, Maud inadvertently allowed some of the poison to get onto her hands, and she promptly collapsed. There she was found by Brother Bernard, and as she lay dying in his arms, she confessed that she had poisoned the Duke out of her love for the monk. Unfortunately, Brother Bernard's reaction was neither understanding, romantic, nor grateful. Instead, he cursed Maud Carew to walk the earth for all eternity. And that is how the Grey Lady began her afterlife as a ghost. In an example of divine retribution, or at least schadenfreude, as a punishment for his own hard-heartedness and failure to forgive Maud when she confessed her sins at the moment of her death, when it was Brother Bernard's own turn to join the choir eternal, he found that he too was cursed to walk the earth as a ghost. And that is the origin of Bury's Spectre of the Brown Monk.
Well, what I'd like to know is, what is the downside of walking the earth for all eternity? I mean, it's tiring, yes, but if you enjoy travel, meeting people, street food, it'd be quite a good thing, wouldn't it?
You might have a problem with the street food.
Not if you're a ghost. And you're invisible, so you can sort of walk round people and, I don't know, poke them, scare them, that sort of thing. I meant poke them with your finger.
I know, as opposed to send them a message on Facebook. Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
thank you.
Exactly, just as any.
Thank you for saving me there.
Yes. There's also an odd footnote to this story, as less than 2 months after Duke Humphrey's death, Cardinal Beaufort became fatally ill and, according to the legend, while on his deathbed, offered the devil all his fortune if he be allowed to live. As for the Duke of Suffolk, the Queen's lover, in 1450 he was banished for his role in the war against France, which England was losing badly. And, as he was on board a ship crossing the English Channel on his way to exile in France for 5 years, he suddenly remembered a witch's prophecy that he would die by water. This was unfortunate, as shortly afterwards his ship was intercepted by another boat. He was taken prisoner subjected to a mock trial, and then beheaded. Just like that. His body, minus his head, which was sent on to Queen Margaret as a keepsake, later washed up on the beach near Dover.
All of which provides us with an excuse to play this track by the late 1960s, early 70s English folk duo Shirley and Dolly Collins. The song Six Dukes is inspired by the murder of the Duke of Suffolk and comes from their 1970 album Love, Death and the Lady on the Harvest label.
I thank you.
Six dukes went a-fishing down by the seaside. One spied a dead body come floating in the tide, and the one said to the other, "These words I heard them say, it's the royal Duke of Grantham that the tide has washed away." And they took him up to London, to the place where he was known. From there back to Grantham, the place where he was born. And they took out his bowels, and they bound up his feet, and they balmed his body with roses so sweet. Six dukes went before him, 9 raised him from the ground. 12 lords followed after in their black mourning gowns. So black was their mourning, so white were the wands, so yellow were the flamboys they carried in their hands. He now lies twixt 2 towers, he now lies in cold clay, and the royal Queen of Grantham went weeping away.
Last December saw the 100th anniversary of the birth of the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. Taking advantage of a recent meeting in London, I'm one of the judges for this year's Arthur C. Clarke Award for Best Science Fiction Novel. I spoke to awards director Tom Hunter about the enduring legacy and relevance of Arthur C. Clarke today. You'll also notice we have a Manuel Fawlty Towers moment a couple of minutes in, one of the perils of interviewing on location. I'm talking to Tom Hunter. Now, Tom, just give us a brief elevator pitch about who you are and your connection with Arthur C. Clarke.
So I'm known as the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Award, which is the UK's premier prize for science fiction literature. When I call myself a director, that means that actually there are 3 directors of the award. We run by an organisation called the Serendip Foundation, and my co-directors Stephanie Holman and Andrew M. Butler are respectively our Chief Finance Officer and our Chair of Judges. My role in particular is more the public side of things in the administration of the award, get everything from getting books in to making sure that we're picked up in the press and all the bits and pieces that go around there. This is my 12th year running the award, and looking forward. I'm still here. Yeah.
Well, I think somebody ordered an ice cream, or
Downstairs. He's still downstairs.
okay, is it all right to leave it here?
No, please
no.
take it downstairs. He's
Okay,
downstairs.
sorry,
yes.
sorry.
Perfect. Okay, now I suppose the obvious question, as Arthur C. Clarke would have been 100 if he'd been still alive in December just gone, is he still relevant today? not least because he was writing his science fiction 70 years ago when an awful lot of things have changed. And if he is still relevant, why do you think he's endured?
Well, I'm going to say yes, he's still relevant. So let's just get that out of the way and talk about the why. I think, from my personal experience of someone whose job is to go out and actually talk and advocate for science fiction, the name of Arthur C. Clarke, as a person, a champion of science fiction, is even more resonant today than perhaps it was in some senses back when he was active in the 60s and 70s. Of course, he was there promoting himself at the time, And you go back through the history of all the amazing things that he was doing, like being part of the moon landing team, the narrating the moon landing live on American TV and all of those kind of things that we sort of might forget now because, as he actually wished, he's most remembered for his science fiction novels. That was his, one of his sort of last wishes, that of all the things he'd done, that he'd be recognised for that. And of course, he's tied in with some of the most iconic science fiction works, 2001 being the obvious example as such a touchstone. Where he's still relevant, though, I think, is in that combination of his enthusiasm for positivity of humanity's future. And I think that's a message which continues to resonate as we inevitably face. It's the darkest time since the last time it was a really dark time, and so on. And that is something that I think keeps bringing people back to both Clarke's writing and the man himself. And in terms of the broader point of can we still read his actual works that were written so long ago, I think we can argue that any science fiction novel written in the 50s or the 60s is going to have moments of dissonance or clunkiness or something. I can't possibly read this, where are the mobile phones? Or all of those kind of moments. And I think if that's the case, well, I'm sorry, I think you're reading it wrong. There is a lot more depth in all those kind of books in terms of the ideas, the encounters that humanity are having, those kind of overarching themes which are just as resonant today. And in fact, I've actually been doing a lot of rereading of those classics, partly to broaden my own understanding of the genre, and I find that they're even more resonant in some ways precisely because of that. The bits that have got wrong enable you to actually read it in a way that, not to say it becomes more fantastical, but it doesn't get in the way. It's more that actually it enables you to read it as an alternative reality where what if that could have happened. I've just finished reading The Forever War, for example, by Joe Haldeman, which is set in 1999 or thereabouts, precisely so that he can have the hero, the elder generation in the start of the novel possibly have served in the Vietnam War. And he admits freely that obviously, that wasn't an accurate date based on scientific extrapolation. It was there for a very different reason. And reading that in 2018, his point is entirely strong. And if you read it and went 1999, I don't believe it. We didn't invent wormhole technology. Well, science fiction. You're doing it wrong.
Well, exactly. It'd be a bit like criticising Blade Runner, which was set this year, isn't it? I think in the original movie.
2019, I think.
Yes.
So, again, where's my flying car? Where's my replicant? Where's my acid rain? Actually, I won't have that one.
We've got that. Do you think part of the attraction of Clarke is the hard science fiction type of it? Because, some of the things he wrote about and almost predicted, space elevators, geostationary satellites, they've now become standard feature. Well, geostationary satellites are a standard feature of life, but space elevators now are a regular feature of science fiction stories. And you don't even bother to introduce them. It's just a concept that, of course, we've got a space elevator.
It is fascinating just how far ahead he was in some of those ideas, and actually sort of, taking the extrapolation of cutting edge science and being able to dramatise it in his novels. We've got not only the classic example of AI with Hal, but AI breaking. Whereas you'd expect the first story ought to be like kind of AI, it's amazing, it's this idea we've come up with, but no, he's broken it straight away, so he's already taking it to that next level. But actually, my answer to your question is no. I think the reason why his work resonates is really the sense of humanity within a huge universe of possibility, and it's an element of hope that's there, and the sense of wonder, and a balance of scale, both how insignificant humanity is, but also as a sort of the other side of the coin of that, just how important we are or we could be, and the importance of the species and its continuance, and all of those kind of elements are there through a lot of his novels. I mean, we think about Childhood's End. Obviously, it doesn't go well for humanity. No, but there is hope even in the ending of that story. A bleak hope, but all the more poignant for that.
Yeah. Do you think with his fiction he excels more at the full-length novel or the short story?
Only for me personally, it's the novels that really work for me now. I mentioned I've been running the award for 12 years, and as part of that, I only had the most brief of kind of contact with Arthur. He was very old by the time I came involved and those kind of things, and I'd read his works as a younger person.
I hadn't realised you'd actually met him.
I haven't met him. I've only been in contact with him. Right. So part of what I really wanted to do, representing the award and his legacy effectively, is to understand more about the man himself through his work, and honouring his, I'd like to be recognised as a writer. So, I'm going out and I'm reading the back catalogue slowly. And it is the novels, for me, that have the longevity. The short stories are fun, and they really are fun. And, the 9 Billion Names of God is obviously a classic kind of example. But it is, everyone talks about the last line.
Yes.
And in the novels, 2001, which I've just reread recently, I read it started reading it again on his actual birthday as a sort of happy birthday, Arthur, I'm rereading it. And what really struck me that time was the amount of duration he gives in chapter length, just a simple flyby of a meteorite going past the spaceship. Gets a whole chapter of, we just scanned it, basically, and it was very exciting. And it's the same amount of time in terms of wordage that it takes for Hal to really go nuts.
Yes.
And he's drawing those bits out, and you might think his plotting and his pacing is all wrong, but actually no, because he's giving value to all of the moments of the Odyssey. We forget that that word is there very evocatively and deliberately, going back to Homer, and he's giving all of those moments of the story equal weight. Yeah. And that is why, for me, the novels have the depth and the resonance. The short stories, though, are great fun.
Yeah. If you were recommending for someone who is new to his writings, his novels, what would you suggest as a sort of essential top 4 or 5?
I thought you were going there. The top 4. I mean, I've got to start with 2001.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is nothing to do with science fiction, but its value as both book and film in terms of cinema.
Yeah.
Yes, science fiction literature, but it's an iconic touchstone that really you need to have read it, like you need to have read 1984, and you need to have read, I would say, The Handmaid's Tale and chuck that in as a first Clarke winner, or you should have a passing familiarity with Jane Austen, and it should sit within all of those kind of traditions as much as it does sit on the genre bookshelf in Waterstones.
Yes. I mean, just sort of jumping in on that with its resonance. When Elon Musk launched his spaceship with the car.
Exactly.
One of the headlines I saw was, "My God, it's full of cars."
Exactly.
Which, if you don't know the reference, you'd think that doesn't make sense.
And if you don't know the reference, you should know the reference. This is the point. This is popular culture, and not just popular culture, but high culture actually, in terms of the work. And I think, again, going on about 2001, while I am a huge fan of Arthur's work, there is a lovely interplay between the fact that he and Kubrick were working on those sort of sides of the story independently. It's not a novelisation of the film, it's not an adaptation of the book, and both play so very well off of each other. You should just really go and read that. Then, of course, Childhood's End is going to be another one that I really think everybody who has an interest in science fiction should really spend time getting to know. And again, it's fine if you've not read it, but there is available in the Masterworks series and so on. There's a beautiful edition out from Pan Macmillan, plug, with a lovely kind of non-science fictional cover designed specifically to appeal to the casual browser of bookshelves. I mean, those would be the two that I might point people towards. A a lot of people I talked to in the last year around his centenary were telling me, it's Fall of Moon Dust for me, or it's Rama, and all of those.
Phantoms of Paradise.
It comes up a lot, absolutely. Yeah. But I think in terms of the sort of the most broad, if you were recommending to someone who was a casual reader of science fiction, 2001 and Child's End would be the two sort of at the end of the bookshelf in hardback edition.
Yeah. What's your favourite of them?
See, I obviously have just raved about 2001 for ages, but actually, what I've really started enjoying recently is Clarke's nonfiction. Mm-hmm. So there's a book I'm just working my way through at the moment. It's essays and collections. There are several, but Greetings Carbon-Based Bipeds is my particular favourite, to the point where I've actually borrowed the title as the greeting for the Clarke Award newsletter. So every issue it's Greetings Carbon-Based Bipeds. And I had this moment of thinking, is this just really insulting to everyone who's on the newsletter? Will they get it? This is a reference. This is a Clarke joke. Do I care if they don't get it?
Yeah.
And I'm reading those because what I really want to do is, again, get closer to the man whose name is on the award that I represent. Yeah. And it's a great way of actually understanding his sense of humour, his passion for, again, the future of humanity, his optimism for where we could go and how great we could be. And that really comes across in those essays. And again, you can talk about the technology and did he, will be completely solar powered by 1999 or any of those other predictions. But he has a beautiful essay in there where he predicts the next 100 years, basically, the sort of the future. And there's stuff that he's got completely wrong, where he sort of jokingly and knowingly sort of saying Prince Harry first royal in space,
yes.
in 2013 and that kind of thing. Well, you think that could still it might be a few years out. And huge spoiler, but by the time he gets to the end, he's talking about the development of not necessarily faster than light travel, but definitely kind of travel between solar systems in one form or another, and contact with non-intelligent alien life and all those kind of things. And his final point is the last date is history begins when we finally make it to the next system.
Yeah.
And to think, he's coming at this huge mind-expanding idea for me just sums up everything about his work, that idea that actually we're still prehistory right now.
Yeah.
We haven't even got cracking yet. This will be from the Dark Ages through to the 21st century is actually just the getting ready, the car in space, the Apollo, all of those kind of things, even the internet, all these kind of elements are just the steps that are going to get us to the interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And damn it, I reckon the date is just outside my life expectancy. So, but again, he knew that as well with his own kind of thing. He was so aware of how he would be missing out on all the cool stuff he was predicting, and still maintained that sense of humour and enthusiasm, and no regret for the fact that we could make it, but he might be not along on the journey.
Yeah, and. We've had his centenary year, but I believe you're involved in a book project.
Yes, absolutely. So 2017 marked the sort of 100th anniversary of his birth, which was in December, a very inconvenient time of year when not a lot of people are available. And we were able to do some amazing stuff around actually celebrating the day. So we screened the movie 2010 in the Royal Observatory's main dome space, and obviously Arthur has a cameo in that film, which is why I went for 2010 rather than the obvious 2001, which does actually turn up in festivals quite a lot. So we went with that one. So we marked that in various ways, but the main thing that we did was launch a Kickstarter book project in partnership with Newcon Press. Ian Waits as editor. We worked with him before, and what we wanted to do was a collection of short stories. It's made up primarily of authors who have won or been shortlisted for the award in previous years. So we emailed everyone we knew and basically went, right, we need a short story. And just like the Clarke Award itself, the definition of science fiction can be as broad as you like, but to give them a bit of direction and to kind of nudge and a wink and honour Arthur in a way we think he might have appreciated, we made sure that every story was precisely 2,001 words long. So, which is actually a great way of getting stories out of busy authors in a hurry, because you give them a deadline and a word count, but you can tell them to write anything. And actually, we were getting stories back within the weekend when we first announced it. So that actually launched on his birthday, the Kickstarter, hit its funding target within a week, and then came in at 200% funded in the last couple of weeks. And now we're in the process of actually building the book itself. The stories are in, we're in the editing process and actually assembling the final package. It's called 2001, An Odyssey in Words, and has a fantastic collection of short stories from people like Alistair Reynolds and Becky Chambers and Chris Beckett, and I could just keep going on and on, as well as some non-fiction. China Mieville, 3 times winner of the award, has contributed a fantastic essay on the genre. Neil Gaiman, who was a judge back in the day, is also known for 1 or 2 quite well-known book projects, but primarily a Clarke judge, has written on the experience. Yeah, we're really kind of giving him a step up to get him out there into the public sphere. So all of those kind of moments around the award, around Arthur, and also then some fantastic science fiction short stories.
That's brilliant. And any ETA on a likely publication date for that?
Well, with Kickstarter, we kind of say it's going to come out this time, but you're allowed a little bit of slippage. But actually, we had a lot of it put in place before we went to Kickstarter. We knew we were going to do the book, but we thought it was a great way to actually publicise it, get people on board, do some special editions, as you will, kind of the signed editions, the limited editions, that kind of stuff. So we wanted to do that, but actually we knew we were going to do the book all along. So we're aiming for a release of around July this year, 2018, around and about the time of the announcement of the actual Clarke Award winner itself.
Brilliant. Tom, pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you very much
indeed. Of course, no piece on Arthur C. Clarke would be complete without playing this track, Also Sprach Zarathustra, by Richard Strauss, aka the theme from the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey. In fact, Sir Arthur himself picked this tune when he was on Desert Island Discs in 1977. The version we're playing is by Gerard Schwartz and the Seattle Symphony Orchestra. And now here's Janie again, and the topic this time is folklore.
Okay, now, Shrove Tuesday, or Pancake Day. It's the day before the start of Lent, and has been associated for a long time with one last blowout of festivals, entertainments and feasts before people head into the fasting and solemnity of Lent. In fact, in parts of the UK, it used to be known as Fat Tuesday. Now, how ironic, because I just read that we in the UK are the most obese Western European country.
Oh,
I'm so proud.
yes,
We're first at something.
we are indeed.
Wonderful. Anyway, in some Roman Catholic countries, this is when they celebrate Mardi Gras. Whereas here in the UK, it is often the association for outdoor sports, such as communal games of football, that still take place at Ashbourne, Atherstone and Sedgefield. However, where you came from, Charles, up north in Scarborough, the local indulgence was skipping. Charles, why skipping?
Of course, no better way of digesting a belly full of pancakes than a vigorous bout of skipping to fight away that obesity. Anyway, it's always a Tuesday afternoon and inevitably coincided with school half-term, and hundreds, and on a good day thousands of people converge, and still do, on the Foreshore Road in Scarborough. That's the road that runs along the edge of the beach on the town's south bay, and they start skipping. Thanks to the local council building a central reservation down the middle of the road, it does limit the length of the ropes, but back in the day when I was a kid, it would be long rope skipping. Great big long ropes with maybe a dozen people simultaneously skipping on each rope. There'd be skipping ropes, there'd be washing lines, and there'd be great big thick ropes that we'd scrounge from the local fishermen.
So when and why did the tradition kick off?
Inevitably, there are claims it's some kind of ancient pagan rite, sort of beating the sea to encourage it to provide a healthy harvest, but the origins are a little more mundane. Long after the religious aspect of Lent had been forgotten, although Scarborough does have a large Roman Catholic community, it seems that back in the 19th century, Shrove Tuesday afternoon was an unofficial holiday for all the apprentices and servants and Bob Cratchits of the town, so after the Pancake Bell had been rung by the town mayor at midday...
A pancake bell? I mean, is that a real thing? Or, let's be honest, it was just an ordinary general-purpose bell, I'm suspecting.
No, it was a special bell, and the
okay.
original one is in the museum, and they installed a new Pancake Bell as recently as 1996.
I stand corrected.
Shows they have their priorities right.
Okay.
The ringing of the bell was the sign that work was over, and everyone headed off to the seafront, where there was an informal fair, sideshows, food stalls, and there'd also be one of those big Shrovetide games of mass football you were referring to earlier, being played along the beach between Scarborough fishermen and fishermen from other nearby villages, such as Filey. Coinciding with the fact they wouldn't be sailing that day, the local fishermen traditionally spent Shrove Tuesday morning spring cleaning their sail lofts and rope lockers, throwing away ropes that were too short or worn to be used for any more fishing trips, and these would be scrounged by the local kids for use as skipping ropes. Sometime around the end of the 19th century, the ball game, and it should be pointed out these ball games were really semi-riots with maybe 100 people on each side scrambling for the ball, they died out and the skipping element took over. My late grandmother, who was born towards the end of the Victorian era, recalls seeing it as a child, and this coincides with reports that skipping first became a thing in about 1903, 4, 5, that period.
Really?
Yes, and they still do it now.
Little devils.
That's all we have time for in this show. Janie and I look forward to your company when we return in a fortnight's time with more weird tales and music from the twilight world of ghosts, folklore, urban myths, witchcraft and magic. But in the meantime, may your gods and goddesses protect you from ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Black Shark, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon. Which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your fortnightly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic and folklore. Keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com or by email at urbanfantasist@icloud.com and on Twitter at Christian Uncut. Good night. Join us again in 2 weeks' time for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show.